Loneliness and isolation has reached peak levels in the workplace. It's something that we really need to address at the root cause. And I'm delighted to be joined by my guest, Jen Marr, today. You're listening to the award winning Happier at Work podcast, the career and culture podcast for people first leaders. I'm your host, Aoife O'Brien, career and culture strategist for global teams. You are so welcome today. And we're talking about how to build relationships through caring at work. My guest, Jen Marr, shares insights from her new book. I'm really excited to dive into that and understand a little bit more about what goes on here, because I think it's so important to address these kinds of issues. So loneliness and isolation, if you're feeling like that, this is an episode for you. If you're not feeling like that, you can be sure that there are other people who are feeling like that. So how to move through those awkward conversations, that awkward zone, and how to really show up for people at work. I know you're going to enjoy today's episode. I would love to know what's one thing that you're going to do differently as a result. And do let me know what you think in the comments, or don't forget to leave a rating or a review on your favorite platform, or share it with a friend who you think would really benefit. Jen, you're so welcome to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm so thrilled to have this conversation. I'm excited for what it brings. Do you want to let listeners know a little bit about your background, how you arrived at doing what you're doing today?
Thank you, Aoife. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. And thank you for joining. I stumbled on this. I guess I never set out to do what I'm doing. My career mostly was in business development, international business development, actually. I lived throughout the world and really worked within the healthcare sector on building businesses throughout the world. And I took a career break when I had three young daughters and ended up being very near a school shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut. And shortly thereafter, I was half a mile from the finish line running the Boston Marathon when the bombs exploded. And those two events in my life, one I was there to support. I spent 5 years supporting Sandy Hook Elementary, going in every week. And the other one, I needed support. And those two things, along with my business development background, put me on a path of understanding our human behaviors when it comes to people that are hurting, challenged, suffering, in hardship. As I witnessed during those times how awkward humans have become, knowing exactly what to say and do when someone's struggling. People really care, but they're not quite sure what to do. That led to my first books, which really created the foundational skill of showing up for people through hardship and challenges. And, when you're in a peer-to-peer support relationship and someone is really going through a difficult time, could be a friend, family member, those skills are very foundational, very passive. You need to understand a little more how to listen better, how not to offer advice, knowing what is when to talk, when not to talk. And so in this case, it's a very passive skill. And as soon as we took that work out, I knew I needed to get it to the next level, which is leaders, which leaders don't have the luxury of not giving advice because they're being looked to guide people through hard times. And so utilizing all of that research I had done on the showing up work, along with my leadership and business background, I combined that into the next book, which is Lifting Up, which goes deeper than showing up. Showing up is the foundation. You can't lift up until you show up. Show up is, really those foundational behaviors, but lifting up then goes much deeper. Lifting up are the conversation frameworks of when I've got someone really challenged in front of me and I need them to do their best work and I need to get them to the next level and I need my team to perform and I've got these conflicts and everyone's burnt out and exhausted and we don't know what's ahead and I don't have the time myself to deal with this. How does that leader manage that? That is what this book is all about. So kind of
Mm,
ties it all together.
brilliant. Can we take a step back and talk about showing up first, just in terms of the foundational behaviors? And then I'd love to dive into lifting up in a little bit more detail.
Mhm. Yeah, showing up, I would say our core piece of work in showing up is that we identified and really began to study what we call the awkward zone. Because most people will say that they are compassionate and empathic, and they're good people. People are good people, and they want to come across as a good person. If you're a leader, you're going to say, I care about people, I want to lead them well. So when we therefore talking about empathy and compassion sometimes is important, but it's not the final target. As I witnessed at Sandy Hook or after Boston, people really cared, but how they acted and what behaviors they did, either they didn't. They thought it in their head, but then they were afraid, like, I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I don't know if it's the right time. What if I make it worse? I don't want to make him cry. I don't want to do this. And so, or you would say things that you thought were right but completely missed the mark. Let me know how I can help. It's just like it's a phrase that is not helpful in any case because it puts the burden back on the person that's struggling. And so over and over again we saw this awkward zone, and really dove deep into analyzing those behaviors, putting it into a common language, and just understanding that from showing up. When we move now into lifting up, those behaviors go deeper in an organizational context. But showing up really began by identifying the trends of loneliness, isolation that's happening, with screens and youth, and with this loneliness and with um, these events happening in the world, and just humans becoming more disconnected. There needs to be a gap filled in skills. And so we identify that gap as the awkward zone. And it really went into all of the different things. It's everybody talks about being an active listener, and that's super important. But it's also after you listen, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? How do you know when to talk? How do you know when not to talk? How do you deal with silence? How do you not just jump in and try to be the fixer? And so those are all the foundational skills we put out in showing up.
Brilliant. I love that. And I want to come back to this idea of let me know how I can help, because it feels like such a good thing to say and such a positive thing to say. But as you acknowledged, it puts the burden on the other person to think about how you can help. And so actually it
Mhm,
makes us feel good in the moment, but it's not helpful to the recipient whatsoever, because then they have to think, well, how could they help? What are some
mhm,
alternatives to asking that? Is it, thinking ourselves what could be helpful and making a suggestion?
mhm,
How do we actually approach that?
mhm. Actually, just doing something,
Mm.
first of all, uh, or giving an option. Uh, So, as an example, you run into someone, you you know they lost their husband. You haven't sent them a card. You haven't done anything, and all of a sudden you're face to face with them in the supermarket. And usually, this is what happens in those moments. We just fall into these phrases that are unpracticed, but they fall out of our mouth. So, the best thing to do in that case is just to acknowledge and validate that that person went through a loss. And in that moment, just say, look, I would love to follow up. Can we meet for coffee? When is a good time to call? Or if you wanted to do something specific, hey, can I pop over a meal next week? Would Tuesday or Wednesday be better? I'd really just love to, do something. Or is there something else that you need instead? So it's very specific, and
Mm.
it doesn't like let me know is just like, oh, like once you hear those words, let me know, it's like, wow, it just throws it over to someone.
Mm.
Whereas it's you're wanting to know right there face to face, right? That's the difference. Would that help? Is there something else? Can I follow up with you in a week? And engaging to a point where you have a solution right there in that conversation instead of blowing it off.
Yeah.
I think is what's key. Or you can use a simple line. How do you need support right now? What do you need?
Mm.
um, and engaging in a solution, instead of just saying, hey, someday when you need something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Instead of batting it back to them and saying, hey, you go and do some thinking and you let me know how I uniquely can help you, as opposed to what is the support that you need right now, and I will do that.
Hmm.
Yeah, love that. And then in
Absolutely.
terms, we're elevating then to lifting up. Talk to me about that journey and how you identified the gaps and what does that actually mean? What's that kind of next level?
Mm-hmm. Well, the next level becomes when we have this awkwardness in human interaction, right? Uh, and when we're dealing with the world as it's just changing so drastically. We're in a post-pandemic world, whatever that means, where we were separated for a while, and that changed a lot of things with organizations, whether it's remote work, work from home, a lot of different distributed workforces now. People have not gone back to working the same way it was before. And in addition to that, whether it's political world events, whether it's technology, generational differences, you have all of these things coming together and merging in the workplace, which is creating a lot of disruption. You can take any one of those. You can take AI, that's creating disruption. You can take generational changes, that's disruptive. Such different needs from native digitals and native analogs. And you just have this world events and constant pressures coming out in the news. And those disruptions are causing a lot of personal disruptions to every person in the workforce, right? If we just look at it from a personal perspective, you see the statistics out there. You see the statistics of burnout, disengagement, isolation, loneliness. You feel it. You know those disengagement numbers of all of the studies that are coming out, and those are personal issues, but also they're coming together with complete company disruption in the face of AI and technology. As an example, every company is dealing with some sort of massive technological shift. You can take a company like Starbucks that used to be a community meeting place and now is a mobile pickup order place. Um, and in each of these shifts, with how we use technology and what customers now want, that company gets caught in a web of change, and who's going to implement that change, who's strategizing that change. And so organizations are drastically shifting while people are massively being crushed by the weight of it all. And so what's happened then is leadership is caught in the middle, especially middle management leadership. The senior leadership ends up needing to strategize how they're going to fix all this or roll out this new change or this new app or this new system or this new process. It rolls down to the middle management, which now gets caught between what the senior leaders need and the new workforce emerging, which are all native digitals, and they want different things. They don't want to work the way it used to be. It used to be that left your work at the door and you came to do your job. And this native digital generation is like, no, I need to bring my whole self. If I'm struggling with my mental health, I want to talk about it. And so what's happening are the middle managers are getting squeezed. The senior leaders don't know how to support the middle managers. The middle managers don't have the skills to support this new generation. And it all boils down to interpersonal skills. It all boils down to that awkward zone. It all boils down to leaders saying, this is not anything I used to have to deal with. In the old method, you would just show up and do your job. And so I felt I was uniquely qualified with having studied these human behavioral skills, and understanding organizational dynamics as deeply as I do, that this is a natural outcome of both of those. And so it's my contribution to try to connect the dots and offer solutions as to how leaders can have those fundamental leadership skills of human relationships that apply to all leaderships. So, supportive leadership is not a whole new leadership framework. It's kind of just these are the human skills you need to lead through challenging and uncertain times.
I love that. And there's a couple of things that are kind of popping up for me that I've seen or read in the last couple of days in relation to these technology shifts. And one of them is Sam Altman talking about how different generations use ChatGPT in different ways. So older generations, like, and I put myself in that, use it as like a Google. You know, instead of going to Google, you'll go to ChatGPT because you're going to get the answer written for you, as opposed to having to go through various different web pages and try and figure it out. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's Gary Vee talking about the kind of companies that excel will be the kinds of companies that are bringing the human relationship back into what they're doing. And his hypothesis, and oftentimes he's right about these things, but his hypothesis is that companies, that we're going to want to pay people in the future to spend time with us because we need those human relationships, we need those interactions. And people now who can tap into that type of journey, or that type of sale, or that type of service, are going to be the ones that come out on top, which I think from a technology perspective is really interesting, and kind of two slightly different approaches to that. But I'd love to come back to this idea of loneliness and isolation, which has come up a couple of times. And this idea, like, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't feel that, and especially after the pandemic. You're saying we're post-pandemic, but do we ever know when it officially ended? Because I don't think there was definitely an official start date, but I don't think we ever had an official end date. It caused a huge amount of disruption. I think people are still probably, and I include myself in this, still feeling the effects of what happened during that time. But it brings us on to the role of leaders, and like, what do you think are the big blockers for having those truly human relationships at work? You know, what are the things that are getting in the way before we talk about how we can solve the problem?
Mhm. I think a lot of it is awareness.
Hmm.
A lot of it is going back to, the last thing I was talking about is you have these senior leaders that are just so buried in change.
Yeah.
They've been taught leadership and they've done leadership in a different way. And they haven't had time nor the bandwidth to really understand the shifts, the fundamental shifts. And I think now is the time that this is starting to emerge and will just continue to emerge more and more and more and more. And it has to do with all the things we talked about, but technology use is a big, big driver of it. And I'll share a statistic. When we work with college campuses and we work with organizations, and so we like to look at data broken out in those areas just to really kind of understand this new generation coming in the workplace. And we ask anonymously a lot of questions when we work with organizations and campuses, and we ask, like, what are your anxiety, depression, burnout? What are all these statistics? We also ask, how lonely are you? And when we compare workers in the workforce 35 years and older compared to current college students, anxiety and depression, the current workforce at the age of 35 or over is somewhere in the area of 35%, which is still statistically significant.
Mm.
On college campuses, anxiety and depression is at about 60%. So
Wow.
almost double.
Mm.
When you look at loneliness, workers over the age of 35 sit at about 11%. Doesn't even really register.
Mm.
College students, up to 75%.
Wow.
Why is that? It really points
These are the
back
digital
to
natives.
these are the digital natives.
Mm.
They don't love the fact that they were raised with a screen in their hands. And when you go to a college campus, we had some student leaders say this to me, and it was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. It's like, should I stay or should I go? They're so used to communicating on a phone that
Mm.
now they're on a college campus and they know they need to meet people. So they go out to a social event, and because they feel it, we're wired to connect, but they get out there, they don't know how to have these conversations, they
Mm.
don't know how to meet people. It's so awkward that they go back to their room on their phones. And the issue is our screens give us an escape. It gives
Mm.
us an out. If you think of when we didn't have phones in our hands, we would have to have conversations. There was no way out. But phones now give us an out. Phones allow us to escape in our own world.
Mm,
If you ask an audience how often do you use a phone to avoid connection, everybody raises their hand because
mm,
human interaction is becoming more awkward because we can escape in our screens. We work all day on screens. We use our screens for everything. People play games on screens. They watch videos on screens. They talk to their friends on screens. And so you get distracted on a screen. You go to a screen for one thing, and next you're down some rabbit hole and you don't even know why you went to
I've
your
been
screen. So
there,
it's
yes.
fundamentally changing our behaviors.
Mm,
But it's not connecting us more deeply. It's creating more loneliness because when we actually do get face to face with people, then we're smack dab in the awkward zone. A screen can't prepare you to have a good, spontaneous face to face conversation. And that's the gap. That's the challenge we're facing now. That's what leaders are going to have to recognize. I just did a LinkedIn post today on it. 9 out of 10 people born after 1998 would prefer to avoid any spontaneous conversations.
mm,
They like to script everything, they like to think about it, they like to um, reread what they wrote and craft every word they say, edit their pictures and send it off. And so it's a very curated world.
okay.
And that's not how the workplace can be. And so a lot of times in the workplaces now, you'll have people that are great with their emails and Slack messages and things like that. They can communicate very well. And you get them face to face and they kind of are a deer in the head. They're not as they're not able to communicate
Mm,
in the same way. And that's the challenge. And so the only way through that is not for the older leaders to say, suck it up, come on, I had to learn this when I was your age, but to recognize like, whoa, they were raised fully different than I was. I have no idea what it's like to be them. We put screens in their hands. We are going to need to help them get their human skills back. On the other hand, that leader should also say, but wow, they're so proficient in this. I can learn a lot from them. So it's also, we don't want to other people, we
mm,
don't want to do anything other than recognize, wow, these guys, these are the skills they have, these are the skills they don't have on the digital natives and the digital analogs, same thing. These are the skills they have, these are the skills they don't have. And guess what? They kind of marry pretty well together.
yeah.
So, figuring out how to blend those and not be at a generational war is really what we're going to need to be looking
Yeah.
at.
And it's interesting, Jen, because it never the thought never occurred to me before that that would ever be an issue, that people don't have the ability to just speak off the cuff, if you like. Um, and suddenly the awkward zone is not just about something terrible that has happened and how to deal with that and how to lead through those situations,
Mhm.
but it's rather how to anyone can find things awkward, and maybe not just digital natives, maybe after the pandemic, if you're so used to being not having to speak publicly or not having to meet people face to face, that you can do everything through messages instead, and now suddenly having to come back to that and realizing that you've maybe lost some of the skills that you thought you had.
Mhm. It's very true. And or people that have just been raised on it and don't know anything else.
Mm,
They look at that face-to-face conversation as a very, very different thing. And I would challenge anybody listening to this um, to think about what I'm saying when you are talking with a young native digital person. And sometimes when we want to have a conversation, um, it's taken as almost a confrontation. So conversational behaviors, like we might ask questions or we might make observations, we're having a conversation to a native digital that is not used to spontaneous conversation, a spontaneous question that catches them off guard feels confrontational, that they have to answer something on the spot, that they can't craft their words. And so this is what is will be growing over the next 5 years. And I think for people to be able to is something I've very much paid attention to over the last year as I've written this book. And it's crazy. Like any parent that has a child and like they're out in public and they talk to a stranger, that child might say, "Oh my gosh," like it's embarrassing and to them, and they're like they consider that confrontational. And the older generations will just say, "No, that's just having a conversation with someone." it's, that's what we do.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that I think is just going to continue to surface. And so to bridge this gap, we need leaders that can recognize that and support it. And so back to your original question, you know, why is this needed and why are we doing this and what do those older leaders think? It's they need the awareness of all of this in order to older leaders want to leave a legacy. They want to leave an impact. They want to make sure that they leave this world a better place. That is what a senior leader will always say. For them to do that, they can't get then frustrated with the younger generations. They need to recognize why those behaviors are happening, not blame the person for the behaviors, but blame the trends that are creating the behaviors that are being exhibited in that employee. And once you can tackle that, then it becomes fully different. Once you understand, you have to be more of a mentor to that person than a boss.
Mm.
You need to be more of a connector to that person than a boss. You need to have a little different lens for that person than any previous employee. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it. Okay, that makes sense. And it becomes the smallest little things that create that supportive environment
Mm.
that take very little time, but it's just a shift in how you lead people with
Brilliant.
those human behaviors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what can leaders do? I know you have some very specific frameworks that you mentioned in the book. What can
Mhm.
leaders do to create these kinds of environments to help to support those digital natives?
Yeah, I think the best thing is just think of human relationships as an accumulation of hundreds and hundreds of touch points. And my best advice would be every single touch point is like investing in that relationship. It's any text you send, anytime you give a call, anytime you stop by where they're working, anytime you ask if you can support them, anytime you ask how their weekend was, anytime you say their name and smile and thank them for a great job, anytime you value what they do and make sure that they feel affirmed, anytime you're in tune with what they're dealing with and want to take a struggle off their plate, every single one of those little actions is like putting money in that relational bank account. And that's what creates a trusted and loyal employee. And when we do everything through screens and everything is efficient through screens and we don't have that human touch point, we end up with people feeling like robots, that they're just being task managed. And then they don't feel seen. Then they feel lonely. Then they feel isolated. Then they are not engaged. And that's where that rabbit hole goes down of this place we're in. You get overwhelmed, you get exhausted, you feel, you know, no one cares, no one sees me, no one has any idea what it's like to be me. So it's those hundreds of little touch points, which don't take time. Everybody has time to do those little touch points
Yeah.
during their day.
I think it ties in with the most recent Gallup results, which share that it's the younger managers who are becoming more and more disengaged. And I was also listening to a podcast recently where the lady was talking about how if something happens to us and we feel like we're the only person that this is happening to, we feel really ashamed about it. So in her case, she had just been fired
Mhm.
and she felt really ashamed about it. And she thought, I'm the first executive who's ever been fired. And like, this is so terrible. And I think we put that on ourselves where we're like, this, I'm the only person that this is happening to. And I feel so ashamed about it. And I think that causes more isolation if we don't want to connect with other humans. But actually, and I know I go into that. Like if something's going on with me, I will retreat into myself. And I think there's a lot of people who are like that. But that then breaks
Hmm.
the connection that we have with other people, which is what we really need to be able to bring ourselves out of that situation.
Mm.
But I love this idea
It
of having
reminds
all of
me,
those, the human touch points. Sorry, go on, Jen.
yeah, no, 100%, because what you brought up is that additional element of not only support giving, but support seeking.
Hmm.
So we we find, I talk about in the book the 580s that and for every organization we've worked with, give or take 15 points, it's 80%. 80%, actually up to 100% of people will consider themselves compassionate and empathic people. I'm a good person. I can see others when they struggle, right? Because humans are relational beings, and for the most part, we are a compassionate species. The second 80% is, where do you feel least cared for at work? 80%, I don't feel seen. So I can see you. I can see people. I'm a good person. But you know what? No one sees me back. All right. Then we ask the next 80%, or the next question is, do you let anybody know? And that 80% is also no, I don't share. Then the next 80% is, do you wish you could? 80%, yes.
Hmm.
Nobody likes to hide what they're dealing with because we're relational beings,
Hmm.
right? And so that last 80% is, how do I navigate this space? How do I how do I ask for support? And in my world as a leader, you have to lean in. You shouldn't be asking the ones struggling to do all the reaching out, which is why I'm so passionate about lifting up people. But also within this book, we have a framework for support seeking, for those people that really aren't speaking up, but for their health, it's so bad to hold in our, to hold in what you're dealing with, to not get support, to not ask for support. um, that's just really damaging for our health. And so, all these things in lifting up, it is for the health of the leader, for the team, for everyone. It is as important as physical health, because mental health is will trickle down into physical health. And that's honestly what this is about. Good leadership will create healthy teams.
Hmm. Those numbers are really interesting in terms of how people think they're showing up in the
Yeah.
workplace. So I am a compassionate person, but I don't feel others' compassion towards me, and other people don't see, and I wish I could share. And I think it's really hard, especially in, and we're kind of coming back around to this awkward conversation or this awkward zone again, but it's in the workplace especially, and having that permission to be yourself and to bring your whole self to work and to talk about these things is so important. um, but the idea that I have to seek out help, and maybe I don't know how because I've never done it
Mhm.
before. I love this idea that as a leader, you need to lean into that. So if you notice a
Mhm.
change in behavior, if something has happened that you're aware of, leaning into that. How, maybe thinking, first of all, if I, so a couple of different scenarios, a few different scenarios for you, Jen. So, how do we seek out that support to begin with? And that's awkward because we've never done it before. But also, as a leader, how do I create that support for someone else that they don't have to do, like you say, the heavy lifting? But also, as the individual, how do I accept that? Because what if I've never needed help before? I never
Mhm.
needed support before. So, how do I give myself permission to accept this support when it's provided, as opposed to feeling like I have to carry the burden myself? So, three different kind
Right.
of
Well, there's a lot of
scenarios.
different questions in there, but it all kind of goes back to the same scenario.
Mm,
When someone is struggling, they're not at their best self, right? They're not performing their best work. They're not as productive. They're not as forthcoming. They're hiding things. So their performance, and therefore the team effectiveness, is suffering. That, as a leader, is what we have to understand, number one. And so, whether it's asking support or a leader asking the employee, it always starts with, is there anything that's interfering right now with your ability to do your best work? Is there anything that you're challenged with right now that is impacting your ability to do your job? Um, what is it that I can do to support you to get you to a place that you can do your best work? Or if you are not able to do your work because you're hiding something and you're not sure you want to even disclose that yet, at least you have to have the conversation of understanding what your capacity is.
Mm.
And do you need help? Can I connect you with the HR department? We have this source and this resource in our EAP. What is it as a leader that I can do to get this employee back on track? Consider a coach of a sports team. If they have an injured player, that player can't contribute to the team they normally would. They usually put him on injured reserve. They create a rehabilitation plan for him, and they have to, figure out the team plan around that injured player. They have to adapt. That's what it should be for every leader that's leading a team. If you have an injured player, if you've got someone that maybe their husband lost their job and that they've got severe financial issues, they can't afford childcare, their their lives are disrupted. You don't have to know the extent of all of the challenges in their personal life, but what you can do is say, okay, let's make this simple. What can you get done this week? What can I support you with? What do I need to take off your plate? Let's figure this out. And it's not a long conversation to solve everything in one. It's like, what are we going to do for the next 4 days? What do we need to do today? I'll touch base tomorrow. What do we and it's that kind of management
Mm.
that gives the person, and as far as support seeking, it's the same thing. It's I'm having a hard time getting my work done. I'm being challenged by these things. I have too much on my plate. I've tried this and I've tried this and I've tried this. It's not working. I need your help to sort this through with me. That's what it is. It's basic. I'm challenged right now and
Mm.
I need support to get my job done.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, at the core of that are some real human issues that are going on. But in a professional environment, the leader has a lot of control over making that person's life livable
Mm.
or horrible.
Yeah.
If they're going to be a taskmaster and just not recognize and try to support them, um, it makes life miserable. Whereas if they'll say, "Oh my gosh, Aoife, I'm so sorry. All right, what do we need to do today? What can we take off your plate? What do you all got on there? What's the one thing you need to get done today? And what about the others? Let me sort through your priorities and let's get you set up for the next couple
Mm.
days." That 5-minute conversation would allow you to say, "Oh my gosh, all right, I feel better. I feel seen. I can focus on this one thing and I can do that for today." That's what this is all about. It's not about going into deep human emotion and being vulnerable about the worst things that have happened in your life. It's supporting people through their day-to-day life in order for them to be able to do their best work. So in the middle of all these challenges, people feel supported, they feel seen, they feel valued.
Mm.
Um, and that then trickles down into the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Make sense?
That's amazing. And I think in building on that, I would say it's maybe preempting those conversations by saying it's okay if this happens because these things do happen and giving people permission to seek out that kind of help because I think
Mhm.
oftentimes we don't allow ourselves to seek that out or we're ashamed or we're embarrassed because maybe it says something about our own capabilities or it's going to say
Mhm.
it's going to speak badly of us or we don't want to get a bad performance review or whatever it might be, all of these reasons to not seek out help or to share what's going on for us because we think we can hide it in some way. But I think the biggest thing I'm going to take from our conversation is the importance of being seen at work. I think you've mentioned that a couple of times, but it's like, do I feel really seen in what I'm
Mhm.
doing as a human being in this organization? Like we've covered quite a few different areas today, Jen. Is there anything you feel like we haven't covered that would really add to the conversation? Is there anything else you feel like we should be talking about?
Well, the only thing I would add, I mean, there's so much in the book that wasn't covered in the conversation, but I think giving leaders confidence to know this space is the most critical thing. And
Yeah.
in order to do that, they need to know the boundaries between what is HR, what is my role? What's the role of a mental health counselor? Where do I fall within this? What can I say? What should I not say? Leaders get concerned about things. So, understanding that framework, which we call the barbell theory, and knowing and giving leaders the tools to say in these scenarios, here's how you know when to escalate it up. Here's how a lot of times leaders will be like, I don't want to bring this up to HR yet. I don't want to break the trust with this employee, but I'm worried about them, right? And how do you handle that? And a lot of times leaders feel kind of in a crunch, and so we always, when we train organizations, we work with them to make sure that how can a leader have an independent mental health consult on an employee before elevating it to HR and making it go on a record. And so those are the kind of challenges that this new era will bring. um, and the solution to all this is very pragmatic. And I think that that's the number one thing that I want to get across. The solutions to supporting people should be as black and white as the company handbook. And that when we do things right, it ultimately cultivates the best emotions. But we don't need to address these things as an emotionally driven process.
Hmm.
It should be a very pragmatic, skill-based process. And that's why I'm excited about this.
Brilliant. So it's the practical stuff, but it's leading to positive emotions at work, essentially. And I love this, that like just understanding your role, because I think sometimes as leaders, maybe we default to HR, like, oh, that's HR's responsibility, or you should talk to this other person, when actually it's understanding where the boundaries lie and what lies within my
Mhm.
remit, and here's what I can do in a very practical way to support my team, who I really care about because I'm a compassionate human being.
Mhm.
I
That's
love
it.
that. Jen, the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast: what does being happier at work mean to you?
Oh, to me, it's having those relationships. It's everything we're talking about. If we don't have those supportive relationships, if we're not attuned to what's going on in the lives of the people around us and live life with them and give them space and grace with their challenges, um, it makes work hard. When you are in tuned and aligned with everyone and you work as a team, just like a coach on a sports team knows how to get everybody motivated, that's where the magic happens. And it is in working through the most challenging times where we grow our best relationships. And so if leaders can embrace that, they will find that they will have their most loyal, healthy, and most fulfilled teams when they can live life together. And it's all relational based. It's all relationships.
Yeah, that's it's such a good point. I think is when you've gone through tough times, and I speak about that kind of a bit more generally. So if you've been in a toxic environment, it's those people who are with you at that time who can be your friends for life because you've been through it all together. So I love that. And Jen, if people want
Mhm.
to find out more about the book, if they want to connect with you, what are the best places, the best ways to do that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, please follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Jen Marr on LinkedIn, one N. Uh, The book will be on Amazon, both print and ebook. Audiobook will be out in 6 months. But my website is showing-up.com as well, where you can find out about organizational training. We certify trainers. All these things are available. This is not just a book and a talk series. This is an actual measurable, scalable, sustainable framework
Yeah,
with train the trainer programs in it. So
brilliant.
thank you,
And
Aoife. This has been
based
so
on
fun.
based on data, I'll add, because you threw that through the conversation as well, that it's all based on research. It's not like, it's not just something that you think, oh, I wish things were like this. It's like, no, this is really happening and this is how to fix it. Yeah, love
A lot
that.
of
Thank
science.
you. Really,
Yeah.
really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for your time today, Jen.
Thank you, Aoife.